Geez, I'm sorry.
Like Real Madrid, but it's a Spanish name.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah, even though I'm from French Canada originally, but the ancestor line goes back a little further than that.
Super cool. Super cool. Good. Thank
Where,
you.
where, where are we talking to you from? Where are you living now?
So I'm in just outside of Albany, New York. So Albany is 3 hours north of New York City and 3 hours east of Boston and 3 hours south of Montreal. So it's sort of like right on the New York border in upstate New York.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm familiar with the area. I lived in Buffalo for almost 2 years.
okay, so the crazy part about anything north of New York City is you're all upstate New York, right? And Albany is 5 hours from Buffalo, but we're all sort of lumped together as upstate New York, you know?
Upstate New York, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're kind of in a different section of upstate New York. I mean, Buffalo guys don't talk about Albany like it's part of their hood.
100%. You're right. I mean, it's 5 hours away, right?
Yeah.
So we're close to the Adirondack, so the Adirondack Mountains, and yeah, it's a really good spot. Great place to raise a family for sure.
Yeah, beautiful area, I'm sure. Well, let me do the official introductions here before we start the into the podcast. So we're interview. My name is Rial LaPlane. I think uh, I read your book, Finding Sustainability. You probably know I did that review. I
Yep.
do reviews for international writers inspiring change, and I also host a podcast. Which is called the Author Shout Out Podcast. So and we're interviewing Trent Romer, right? That's how
Yep.
you say your last name.
That's correct.
Uh,
Yep.
we had originally done a feature on your book back, I think it was a couple, 3 years ago, Finding Sustainability. I think shortly after it came out, right?
Yeah, that's correct. In 2021, it came out in 2021. That is, yes. Yes, you reached out
Right,
and we collaborated on that.
right. I remember reading the book. I was impressed with it because of the story. And that's what I'm going to sort of dig into here today is the story that led up to the book. And because your family had a unique business, which was plastics. You were producing plastics of some sort. I don't remember the exact details.
Yeah, correct. My grandfather started a plastic bag manufacturing business back in 1961. And then my father was onboarded into it in 1968. He owned it for 20 years, and then my brother and I took over the business for the 1998 to 2021. And my father's one of 11, so I have 32 first cousins. So much of the business, the labor force relied on the family. So it was very much a
Mm.
family owned and operated business. Making custom bags. So when you think about ice bags or bread bags or mulch bags or prints or Ziplocs, it was much more towards the custom side, not the stock side or the garbage can line or even the retail outlet sort of thank you, for shopping bag. It was much more in the custom world.
Was it an innovative business at the time back in the early 60s?
Yeah,
Plastic bags?
it's funny you say that. So we started with with cellophane. So cellophane was sort of the first origins of packaging, and then it quickly became plastics, and fossil fuel based plastics sort of became the standard for most things up until probably I would say 5 or 6 years ago when a lot of different alternatives it just started to get scaled to the point where you could actually use them as a direct substitute.
Right. But up until that time, your business was pretty much on the same platform up until, am I
Yeah,
correct?
yes, it was pretty much I think when my brother and I took over, it was almost don't screw it up, right? Like things are
Keep
going,
it going.
yeah, keep it going. It's not a high margin business, but it really was a great family business where we had great employees, super loyal and dedicated, but it wasn't all about the bottom line, so to speak. It was more about family and making sure you can get to doctor's appointments and all those things. So it was more of a lifestyle business in a lot of ways that I really look back on my childhood and saw how my father was able to come to all my games and all those things. And I think I really sort of leaned into that and wanted to sort of follow in his footsteps
Well, there
in
is
doing
something to
it.
be said for being your own business owner because you set the rules. And
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think with so much family in the business, again, the loyalty was second to none. However, that comes with a lot of issues as well. But
Of
again,
course.
you're really, really so thankful and grateful for the loyalty and the dedication that especially our family members showed. But we've had so many people that have been there for so long. But
That's great.
somewhere, Rial, in the mid, maybe this is sort of what we're driving at here is how did this story become this story?
Right.
Yeah, somewhere in the mid 2013, 14, 15 range, I started to become increasingly uneasy about the product that we made, which was plastics. It was increasingly finding its way to the natural environment. The anti-plastic narrative, for lack of a better way of saying it, was beginning to grow. And it sort of touched off of something in me that maybe there was a better way, maybe there was a better material. How can we potentially think about this? And then two things happened in 2018. One was the June 2018 cover of the National Geographic said plastic or planet, and it had an iceberg, but it was a plastic bag sticking out of the ocean, which really went in depth on the plastic issue. That wasn't all against plastic, but it really brought to the forefront how much plastic was being produced and how
Mhm.
it wasn't finding its way to the waste streams that we have available, or in a lot of places, it's unavailable. And then the second
Right.
thing, which really tipped the scales for me, was New York State put in place a retail bag outlet bag ban. So you could no longer go in a retail outlet and walk out the grocery store. You had to bring your own bags.
Or you could buy a paper bag,
Or
right?
you could buy a paper bag. So while that we don't make that bag, it really sort of fed into this anti-plastic narrative. And I actually think our employees, in a lot of ways, started to think to themselves, geez, what are we going to do? What's the future sort of look like? And it really was sort of the final two straws for me to sort of say, I need to try and do something about this. So I started sort of this journey, for lack of a better way of saying it. I didn't really know I was on a journey, but I started to try to educate myself. I went to
Kind of a
Europe.
domino effect, wasn't it?
Yeah, I went to Brussels and went to a plastics conference in Europe because they were ahead of us at the time. I applied to and I was accepted into the Harvard Sustainability Leadership Program, which was a week-long on-campus experience, which between me, you, and a lamppost, it was super intimidating just to sort of be in that room. But it was a great week that I took away a lot of things. I went to Seattle to the Sustainable Packaging Coalition event, which is a week-long event on specific sustainable packaging. So I was doing all these different things. And I was blogging about them to try to educate and educate not only myself, but also our clients and our employees. And I started to piece it together, sort of had this narrative of a book. Um, and I thought to myself, geez, maybe this would give me some more credibility in the space, and also really tell an authentic story of what we were doing to try and transform
So
our
the book
business.
was part of the evolution. It wasn't part of the original plan.
No, not at all. I
Uh,
really, real by trade, I am not really, I enjoy writing. I am not a writer. I didn't go to journalism school. I haven't done any of that. I enjoy writing and being creative in some way, shape, or form. And it's sort of the start of the lineup. And we were having success in doing certain things. Like we one of the some of these things are really low hanging fruit. You say, well, what can you do as a business? Well, you can reduce your waste. And I remember going to our production manager and I said, what if I asked you to reduce our internal waste, which at the time was 600,000 pounds a year? What if I asked you if we could reduce our waste by 25%? And he paused and he looked at me and he said, well, it would cause us to act in a different way. And I thought to myself, exactly, right? Like it wasn't no, we couldn't do it. It's no, we would have to change a bunch of things, but we could do it. So that really set in motion for us a year-long goal to reduce our internal scrap by 150,000 pounds, which was 25% of our waste, which would translate to about $350,000 right to the bottom line. So
Not bad.
it was
Not
a
bad right
fun
there.
quest. We did a lot of educational things. We made up T-shirts. We had something called Waste Week. You hear Shark Week. We have this Shark Week on Discovery Channel here in the United States. They focus on sharks for 1 week. I don't think about sharks the rest of the time, but during that 1 week, so we kind of played off that and we said, look, we can do some trainings during the year, but let's have one focused week of training. We'll call it Waste Week, right? And we'll create T-shirts and we'll do a bunch of fun gaming. We got a
Was this
food
is this for the community or for just the company?
just for our company, just for our
Okay.
company, yeah. And just to sort of bring this heightened awareness
Mm,
around waste. So we did a bunch of different things to reduce our internal waste, and by the year end, we charted it. You know, had the old thermometer at the employee entrance, and lo and behold, we did it. So that was one thing that we did. The other
Let me
few,
ask you a question just before
yeah,
you go on. Did
yep.
you have to change your process to eliminate that, to bring that waste factor down, or was it just a matter of how to deal with the waste?
No, it was everything. It was process, it was education, it was during changeovers. We generate a lot of waste when you change job to job.
Mm,
And do we have two people there or just one person? If one person's there, you're just creating too much waste. You know,
mm,
you can't make adjustments and look at quality, you know. So it was just some of these things were very, very minor things that we just sort of said, how can we reduce our waste? And we did this systems map, which is a concept where you put all the causes of waste on one side, you put waste in the middle, and you put effects on the other. And it's sort of we involved about 30 of our staff to create these causes, and then we started to pick off these causes one by one. It was very much we did a little bit. We met once a day for 20 minutes, and then the next day we didn't try and solve everything at once. So it was really took a while to ingrain those processes. Um, so it was part training and part process for sure.
It kind of reminds me of this. I remember reading an article about Toyota and how they had to reduce the weight of some of their cars and also the cost. And one engineer came up with an idea, which was to simply make smaller screws out of a different alloy, and it those smaller screws reduce their production costs massively. Also, the weight and the like you would say the just the environmental impact. I mean, so I can understand how these small little bits would add up to a lot in the end.
You just made me think of one of the key things we did was our purchasing manager orders raw materials. So we don't make plastic. We're strictly a converter. So you got to order the raw material, bring it in,
Um,
and then print it or cut it to size. And we always ordered 20% more than we actually needed. So that accounted for waste and scrap. So we said to our purchasing manager, let's start ordering only 15% more. It will force our internal folks to say, okay, this is how much material we have. This is how much we have to make out of it. And it just was this little subtle change. We just ordered less. And all of a sudden now we become more efficient in what we're doing to take less material to make the same amount of product. So it just touched off something in me. That's exactly sort of this low hanging fruit, simple ideas, but it took some time for it to change.
uh, well, it's a similar concept. I mean, we're over here in Europe, where we're headquartered, and like you have it in the States. The campaigns to recycle and to reduce waste. I mean, it's a mental process as well. You start to think about, oh, I don't need to use as much plastic. I don't need to use these plastic containers, or I don't need to throw this away or that. And it really is a matter of education, like you say, is it's bringing in a new perspective.
I think sometimes too, when you think about this, and we've talked about this in the plant, is when you give somebody a package, you're giving them something they don't want.
Mm.
You want the
They want to
bread.
throw it away.
Yeah. You're giving me something that I really don't want. I mean, I need it because I need to get it here in a safe way. But how can I ease the transition from giving you something you don't want so you can take the next step, right? And if something's recyclable, or you want to communicate on the package the best way you can to give whoever you're giving that package to a resource to do something with it. And
Mm.
so when you think about sometimes packaging that way, you want to reduce it, meaning, less weight, a different material,
Mm.
more friendly inks, the labeling. And I think packaging for a lot of brands, it's one of the only environmental things that I talk about is in front of the curtain. There's so many environmental claims and things like net zero by 2050 and, all these things.
Right.
They don't I mean, they're great, but it's hard for a consumer to sort of identify with that in a certain way, to fact check it.
No,
Whereas
but they can identify with a plastic bag in their hand.
when you have a package from a brand, it's right in front of the curtain, right? This is who we
Yeah.
are, and I think it's a great opportunity for brands to really utilize that medium.
It's like you sort of sparked this idea in my head of a campaign. You could almost have a double-edged, like a two-sided sword. You could have the product you're buying is what you want. The packaging is what you don't want. But how you process those two is different.
Yeah, and it's totally different. You're yes, I totally buy into that. Now, speaking of materials, that was one of the other major things that we had to do internally is to say
Um,
we're primarily offering fossil fuel-based, low density polyethylene as sort of the main driver, of a lot of the business. So we said we need to trial different materials and what was out there. And when we were trialing different materials, they had to fit sort of three criteria. One was it had to run on our existing equipment.
mm,
We couldn't invest, millions of dollars in different equipment at our size. So it had to run on existing equipment. Two, if we ran out, could I easily get more? Meaning,
right.
if somebody's making plastic out of seaweed in your kitchen sink and we can run it, that's great. But if I need 10,000 pounds, how am I going to get it? Right. So it had to be scaled to some degree for us to do it. And then the third thing was, is it priced what we considered reasonably? So low density plastic is between $1.50 and $2 a pound. If something was $25 a pound, there was no way we, a company our size, could probably sell that.
It just priced you right out of the market.
Just
Yeah.
price out of the market, and all of a sudden, any kind of effort you're making to change people sort of loses credibility because you almost are seen as something you don't get it, right? Like if you don't do that. So we came up with three. We trialed 10 different things. We sort of went all over the world, really, to try and find materials that we could stock and have available. One was certified compostable material. So the material would be certified compostable in an industrial composting facility and a
Huh.
composting facilities. Two was a post-consumer recycled content. So not post-industrial, but post-consumer. It goes into the consumer waste stream. That plastic is collected and then regrinded and made into post-consumer recycled content material. And then the third was a bio-based material. So the carbon that you use to make the plastic was taken from plants instead of fossil fuels. So there was a bio-based option. So those were the three that sort of fit that criteria that we
Mm,
began to offer people to see if they would, give them options. And a lot of times we did some double quoting, meaning you would ask me for a quote on a particular item and I would quote you what you're asking for and say, "Hey, by the way, we offer this in a post-consumer recycled content material. The cost is XYZ. You can also get in a compostable," and then link back to some blogs to try and get that ball rolling with some of the marketing and then
and what was the
hands-on.
response to that? Were people actually interested?
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of interest, and we eventually grew that by the time we got bought in 2021, and I'll get into that story a little bit. But we our sales in sustainable films over 2 years was about $500,000. So we sort of grew it for us to a pretty good spot that I thought
Mm,
gave us some traction, and we weren't losing money on that. We were pricing it just as we normally would. We were stocking the material because a lot of people they wanted to trial it, right? And I can't say, oh, for a trial order, you need to order, 200,000 units. We could say, hey, you could get 5,000 units because we're actually stocking the material in these
mm.
sizes. So we sort of had to play that game a little bit, but we built it over time, and I think it got a really, really good response to
So
that.
which one did you end up going with?
We did all three.
You did all three.
So we
Okay.
trialed 10 different ones and we settled on those three because they almost all were different. One
Ah,
was, I think the easiest one, Real, for people to understand is the post-consumer recycled content. It
yeah, I
means
was
it,
thinking.
yeah, it just, you don't really have to explain the story too much. You realize that you're pulling that post-consumer waste through, you're creating the demand. The other
Yeah,
two are,
and I know from my own perspective, when I see it's recycled post-consumer, I'm thinking, oh, we're doing a good thing.
Yeah, we are creating the demand. So when the
Oh,
shirt that I'm wearing is made from recycled polyester. So
oh,
this whoever's making this shirt has to go find that and start to pull that demand through the system, which in essence will increase the supply if enough people
right.
sort of do it. So you can think about it that way. But it really appealed to three different sort of environmental choices. There's a couple states in the United States that have composting within the state limits or in city limits, so that appealed to them. It's expensive, but I think those three gave us some pretty good options. We did a couple other things. I'll just touch on those briefly. One is we created a design guide. So we listed all of the things when you order between materials and inks and labeling and boxes and pallets and all of these things. And we said, here are some options. And then we rated them as environmentally green, environmentally not so good. We can do better. So it was a quick way for customers to say, oh, okay, it's more than just the film, it's the inks, it's how far am I from you. All of those things sort of play a role
Mm,
in this. And we tried to lay that out in a pretty good way that gave people an opportunity to think about things in a quick and easy, visually easy way. So we created the design guide. We also participated in the River Keeper, which is a cleanup effort in the Albany area. It's the first week of every May. There's about 100 different organization groups up and down the Hudson River, from New York City to Montreal, that clean up any garbage near the river because anything near the river potentially gets in the river and
oh,
then into the ocean. So it's an annual event that our employees do, and I think it's just a recognition that this is material that we're making and we need to take more responsibility for it wherever it winds up. And sometimes it doesn't wind up where we want it to, so we got to go pick it up. So
no, it's
it's only
brilliant.
one day, but it just sort of sets that framework of what we're trying to do.
Well, it still raises awareness on the subject when that many people get involved in something like that. Curious, is it a lot of stuff, a lot of garbage that gets picked up
Yes,
cumulatively?
yes. I mean,
It's
clothing
probably
to
outrageous, right?
packaging. You're just surprised because we've done it now 6 years running. And sometimes we've been back to the same area, and you would think, oh, we cleaned that up last year. And it's like, no, not so much. I mean, it's not as terrible, but there's certainly a lot more there than you would think.
Hmm, amazing. Yeah. So basically, this whole story led up to finally you introduced this. Did you switch completely to the new plastic format?
No. So I think that's an important piece of sort of anybody's sustainability journey is that I think about sustainability as environmental, social governance, and financial, right? It has to
Mm,
make financial sense or else the business doesn't exist. So what we would continue to do is just offer these options.
oh, okay,
If customers don't want them, I can't force them on them, and we got to pay the bills and all those things. So
sure.
um, it it was a market that developed, and what happened was well, I wrote this book. So that was one of the things that happened was all these experiences I put into this book. And I have to tell you this quick story. So when I wrote this book, somebody said to me, you have to get an editor. And I was like, oh, I do? Yeah, I think I should get an editor. So I found an editor, and the editor said to me, send me your manuscript, and I'll get back to you and let you know if this is a good fit for me to work with you. So she called me back about a week later, and she said, I like the way you write, and I really like the topic because at the time, this is 2019, 2020, the
Yeah.
anti-plastic narrative I still think is there, but it felt more acute at that time. She said that no one's going to read this. And I was like, what? I poured my heart and soul into this thing. And she said, you have written an academic paper. You have 160 footnotes on a 140-page document. You've told me what everybody else thinks, but I have no idea what you think. And really,
Oh,
that's the most important part. So I said to
yes,
her,
of course.
oh, Rial, I said to her, so I have to rewrite like 20%? She said, more like 80%. So it was great advice because really my voice wasn't in there. It was sort of what everybody else thought and sort of just put it together with sort of this. And she really helped me put it into a story, into a narrative to say, and the back cover says, what would you do if your family business were threatened by something out of your control? What would you do, if 57 years of family history grown through generations of hard work and sacrifice were suddenly at risk? So,
Well, that's what I remember about the book too, because when I read it, I remembered it being more like a personal journey, a personal story, because you
yeah,
personalized it very well. Yeah, because otherwise it would have been just sort of a documented thesis about the state
yes.
of, you know,
And
and
she had this, the editor that I found had this foresight to say, if you put it into a narrative told through your eyes and be authentic, that you will be better served by that. And so she was right. And what happened, sort of the rest of the story is we were doing really well. And we were growing our sustainability program, not just with those few initiatives, but we had some different ones of training
mm,
and things. We started to attract investment. So private equity firms approached us to sell our company. And um, lo and behold, we found somebody that we thought was a really, really good partner for us, and we ended up selling our business for twice what I ever thought we could have sold it for.
well,
And
were
at the
they involved in the plastics industry? That
So they had one other packaging company underneath their umbrella. So the private equity firm had 17 different companies under their umbrella,
oh,
and we were added as an 18th at the time. And they asked me at the time, they said, you know, they didn't only buy our company because of the sustainability program. I don't want to mislead anybody, but it was certainly part of the journey, and they really liked that aspect. And they said, you did a good job with what you did with your company. Would you be our sustainability operating partner for our entire business? And I said, wow. That sounds really good to me, but I got to tell you, I don't know anything about third-party logistics. I don't know anything about fertility clinics. I don't know anything about medical device companies. All of these other companies underneath their umbrella, I I didn't really I knew the packaging industry. I didn't know all these other things. And to
of
their
course.
credit, they said, we trust that you'll figure it out. So I went back to school. I took some coursework through Yale University and really understood how to become more of a consultant in the sustainability space to help different companies sort of um, kind of mimic
So
what
is that
we
what you're
did.
doing now?
Yes, so I'm a sustainability operating partner for the larger company. Our old company is still under that umbrella. I still interact with them on a, I wouldn't say regular basis, but still interact with them. So I'm trying to move more companies in this direction.
What an interesting story, though. You go from the domino effect. Did you ever think it would end up at that?
No,
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 I can't imagine.
not even at all.
You
And
go
then,
to an event in Brussels to check out sustainability options, and now you're a sustainability pro.
well, yeah, I sometimes I question that, but I'll tell you two other things that you just made me think of. So after this book came out, I had so many people ask me, said, "Who is that on the cover? Who is that in the canoe?" And they said, "That's you, right?" That's meaning me. And I was like, "Oh." I said to myself, "If you read the book, my hope was you would see yourself as someone that needs to take their own journey." Right? It was more
Right,
about trying
right.
to get the and I said, "Clearly because I I was getting that question, my message wasn't really getting through. So I wrote this book, which came out a year and a half ago, called This Is Our
Right.
Home. Yep. So this book is more of a business book, The Finding Sustainability. This one is more of a personal one, what really aimed at the reader that says, hey, reader, this is how you can move in a more
So this
sustainable
is sort
direction.
of like the household owner or the private person. This is sort of a bit more of a manual, personalized for them.
Yes, but it's written very similar to Finding Sustainability. It's written as a story. And the
Okay.
story surrounds my hometown, which my hometown is just outside is a lake which has been polluted my entire life. It's a Superfund site in America. 1,300 different sites are federally recognized as areas they need to clean up. The dumping of PCBs in the lake happened back in the 1960s, 50s, and
Mhm.
60s.
Mhm.
It still hasn't been cleaned up. So I didn't really know the whole story about Nassau Lake, and I really dove into that story, and then sort of use that story to sort of mimic what's going on today. Because I think it's easy to look back and say, "Oh, you were dumping chemicals into a lake in the 50s and 60s, and someone thought that was okay. There was nothing illegal about it, really." Um, and now I think to myself, it's easy to think that right now. And I think who in the 2060s, what are people going to be saying? They're going to be saying you were dumping that much carbon into the environment at that rate. Like what were you doing? How is that possible, right? So I tried to make that analogy in a
Mhm.
subtle way through storytelling.
No, it's great. I'm actually interested in reading that book too. Maybe we should have do a feature on that here at iWick, just to give it even more spotlighting, you
If
know?
you're interested, yes, but the connection to the 2 books is exactly what I just said. I was like, "Oh, man,
Okay,
I think I have to write another book." But it did give me an opportunity to go back to my hometown, which was great.
that's great. Um, they just off, off the cuff here. What do you think the future of plastics is? What does it look like from your perspective?
It's a
I
really
mean,
good
is
question.
this a bottomless pit, or is this going to run out someday because the fossil fuel industry has a tap on it? I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, I mean, everything you read, it's not going away, and it's gonna double in the next 20 to 30
Um,
years, So, it's more
but more
about
sustainably, do you think? Maybe 50-50, who knows?
I
Hard to
would
say,
like
huh?
to think so, but it's so price driven, and if without the help of regulation, it's really, really hard. Now, EPR laws are beginning to pop up here in the States. I know the extended producer responsibility laws, I know in Europe they're more established.
Mm.
But now 5 states in the US have these EPR laws, which essentially puts the ownership of the packaging that you put out back to the brand. So the brand will have to uh, put money into a fund, which will essentially fund these EPR programs that hopefully enables recycling to do what we all hope it can do. Flexibles have a terrible recycling rate, which is part of the problem. So
I'm
I
not
don't know.
familiar with the recycling platform in America. I mean, I lived in the States for 30 years, but it's just sort of like now, is plastic, do you go to recycling places in your local community and put metal in certain containers and plastic in other ones? Is that all set up as a standard now or what?
It's so different state to state. So
Okay.
Where I live here in New York, it works really, really well. And we have a recycle bin and a landfill bin, and they're picked up on different days, and they go to different places. I was really interested in material recovery facilities. So what happens where these recyclables go, right? You see these news stories that say, oh, they just go to the dump anyway. And that really sort of caught my curiosity. So over the course of the last 4 years, based on conferences I visited and whatnot, I've been to 4 different ones, one in Albany, one in Austin, Texas, one in San Francisco, and one in Seattle. So I went and visited Waste Management, Balcones, and 2 others that run these huge material recovery facilities where they're getting in dump trucks every 2 minutes full of recyclables. And lo and behold, when you go to places like this, you realize they're making money. Like they're sorting it into metals, plastics, paper. They're selling the bales, right? For a commodity based pricing that's going to recycled content for shirts and packaging and all these things. So it I would encourage people to go to their local material recovery facility if they have one, because it'll renew your sense of recycling works. There are
Mhm.
companies who are
Interesting.
doing this who are making money, right? We just don't have enough of them um,
Uh,
to do that. Like the state of Mississippi, they don't have a recycling like New York does. It They just don't have access to it for whatever
so
reason.
they just do landfills,
They
just
just
filling
do
up.
landfill, right? So I think sometimes the numbers get a little skewed when you look at the aggregate. But if you look in certain places, I think it's working better than you think, I think is the way to put it.
But I think it's important that your book is important because it pushes the message of sustain. I mean, over here in Europe, I can't speak for all of Europe, but of course, we're based in Sweden here. Every community within a 5-minute walk of every household, you will find a recycling station,
Wow.
literally. So, everything gets either recycled or burned for energy. There are no landfills in Sweden at all, and they use every bit of waste to either produce energy or going back into, as you would say, like recycled into the marketplace. Um, it was quite eye opening when I came here and found how efficient the system was and how much it impacts your lifestyle because you think with it. You don't want to, like, you don't see any waste being, it's just no landfills.
Yes, it's an awareness thing. It's
Yeah.
a education thing. I'm also curious for you, do you have confidence in the system?
Yeah, we've actually checked it out just to make sure it isn't like you're putting everything in 5 different bins and it's all ending up in the same place.
Yep.
But no, the media over here is very, very hot on that issue. And sustainability in Sweden, it's a very environmentally, uh, culturally aware society. They're very tuned in on that whole subject. So you can't mess around with it here without it.
Right, without a consequence.
Without consequences, and somebody's going to get their hands burned if it's not being kept that way.
Yep.
But no, I'm quite impressed with the amount of work that you went through, the journey you took, and just your persistence, and also the integrity of how you transformed your company. Because I'm sure this must have like inspired other companies, even small business owners, to do a similar thing. I'm sure you've had some kind of feedback like that.
Yeah, yes, I think sometimes people get overwhelmed because they confuse sustainability with philanthropy, right? And it's
Right.
not,
Yeah.
especially with the
It's
companies.
practicality.
It's practicality, and you can, it is a value driver. It's a reputation value driver, and I think the company that I work for, they believe that companies with established sustainability plans and programs sell at higher margins, period, right? So they have leaned into that, and that's essentially why I, have the job that I do as the sustainability operating partner. I will tell you also, Real, I just accepted first time doing this. I am teaching as an adjunct professor at a local college here, a course called "The Business of Climate Change." That's the name of the course.
Interesting.
So I've taught over the summer at the local university just in a summer program, but I've never had my own course. And the private equity firm is okay with me just 2 days a week or 2 mornings a week. So I got my first foray into this space, and I look forward to it.
That's great. Now you have a class to talk to.
Right, exactly. And it's funny what you said about the Scandinavian countries who are, it just sort of more of a cultural thing. It's an awareness thing. It's just
Mm.
what you do. Um, as I've pieced together this course in different ways, I've certainly found a lot of examples from that part of the world that you can really lean into and show real life examples.
Yeah, exactly. Don't forget, we have Greta just down the street from
That is
she's 4
correct.
hours from where I live, and she's Miss Climate Change activist,
Yes, a
planet
hundred
Earth.
percent.
So, um, well, I think you told the story very well. Do you think? mm, I know this is a touchy subject, numbers, but plastics and climate change. If the plastic industry basically continues to increase because of the market demand, as you said, what are we talking about for climate change? What are we looking at here? How much is this influencing climate change from your own research?
Well, I think, when you look at sort of climate change in the big narrative, and if you want to, it's not, it's super. it's not simple at all. But
Yeah,
basically, in a certain sense, if you could put it in one sentence, it'd be we got to keep fossil fuels in the ground.
yeah,
So
good. That's a good answer.
if that is sort of like that's what we have to do, then anything we're making out of it, i.e., plastics, is we have to try and find a different source. And there are other sources, the things that we already have. So,
And,
I think it's easy to sort of think, oh, the packaging industry, these things are so lightweight, which they are. But I always think sort of in that bigger picture, and you put in this idea of it's just the way we do things. It's
mm,
just the way things are. And I think if we can all begin, and this is why I'm teaching, is I'm hoping I can have more of an impact maybe on that younger generation, and begin to think about uh, climate change as kind of like gravity, right? We don't question gravity. It just is, and we have to work around gravity to do what we want. And if we can
exactly.
think about, I'm not gonna tell them this. I want them to come to their own conclusion, right? This is
Yes.
my job is to just present information and then sort of steer them and ask questions, not tell them. But I think if you can begin to think about climate change and fossil fuel use and global warming as something that is like gravity, we have to work around that to do the things we want. I think that awareness is ultimately, I think, as these students in their 20s start to take leadership roles in the next 5 to 10 years, that will be formative in the decisions that we're making. That
Yeah,
they're
because
making.
they're going to be the influencers. It's always that way. It's the young generation that heralds in change, and they are going to be the leaders in all fields in the next, like you said, 5, 10 years. So the seeds that you're planting right now are going to affect them, even if it only affects 2% of them, 3% of
Right.
them. Those 2 or 3% could become the head of Coca-Cola or Pepsi. The people who are responsible for producing what half of the plastic bottles in the world, two companies basically.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so I just, when I got the opportunity, I was like, this is sort of where I think I want to be. I actually, back in the 1990s when I graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I liked my dad's lifestyle, but I kind of felt guilty about going to college and then just going to work for him. I was like,
mm,
I could have done that without. I mean, I learned a lot in college, but so I actually thought I wanted to teach. So I went and got my master's in education at the local university at night as I worked for my dad, thinking that 4 to 5 years, maybe I'll just not want to work in the business and I'll teach. But I obviously stayed with my company with my dad, and I'm super blessed and thankful I did. But that teaching piece, when I got this opportunity, sort of came full circle, and lo and behold, now I'm really nervous that I have 21 new faces. And actually, my
that's
wife says
great.
to me, she says, "Now your class is on a Monday," and I said, "Yeah." She said, "It's at 9 in the morning." I said, "Yeah." She said, "So there's freshmen in your class." I said, "Yeah." She said, "So the first person that some of these freshmen in college are going to see is you." And I was like, "Oh, wow. That's a pretty big responsibility. I have to go back and rewrite rethink about that first lesson, right?" Oh, so anyway.
That's a good challenge. But like you said, it's another domino, and like the first domino to this domino. Again, the journey. How could you have even predicted that? You see, it's like amazing.
Well, yeah, I thank you, but it's always it's great to meet people like yourself who, you uh, can draw these journeys out. I mean, it makes me remember of who you were, right? Instead of you're sort of just in the moment sometimes.
Well, I'm an author too, so I tend to look at storylines and connect dots. But I like understanding what makes people tick, and your story I think it's a fascinating story. Well,
Thank you.
we're gonna be wrapping up here. I just wanted to ask one last. First of all, you said you were going to write it. Is there a new book in the offing, or is that just sort of a plan right now?
Yeah, so this second book came out a year and a half ago, and I'm actually working on a fiction book right now. I Real quick, my mother had Alzheimer's for the last 10 years of her life. She passed away a year and a half ago. And she spent the last 2 years of her life in a nursing home, really close to us. So we were very, very close family.
Mm.
It was uh, an amazing experience to see her uh, conduct herself with grace, even though she knew she had this debilitating disease. And then towards the end, the nursing home staff and the people there were just amazing. I think in the United States, I think nursing home employees and people in a nursing home are very undervalued, very underappreciated. I don't think I gave it two thoughts until I spent 3 or 4 days a week there for 2 years running. I tell you that story because I want to bring attention to uh, people in a nursing home and employees in a nursing home. So I'm writing this murder mystery in a nursing home where the nursing home patients sort of piece together these clues, and the police staff gives them no credit, no credibility. This person has dementia. How are they a credible witness, right? So it's sort of this multi-generational thing. I'm about midway through thinking through it, but I was really inspired to do it because of the experience that I had with my mom and basically living at the nursing home for a year and a half with my family. So anyway, I'm working on that.
That's great. Well, now we know. You've got the writer's bug now, Trent. It's incurable. I just want to let you know
It's
it's
terrible.
incurable.
It's
Yeah,
terrible sometimes.
it's really hard on sleep and family sometimes. But
Your mind
okay,
just
well,
going.
all right. Well, okay. Last question for you before we end off. Being an established author now, what tip would you give? What would be the single thing or tip you'd give to somebody who's coming into the field to write a book?
I read this a long time ago, and I can't even remember who I read it from, but if you really want to know the things that you like, think about the things that you like before the age of 18. And generally speaking, anything you were passionate about back then, you probably still have a passion for in some way, shape, or form. So that
Mm.
could relate to a story. And just going back to the book that I'm writing now, I'm a big 80s guy. I grew up in the 80s. And I love the 80s. I love the music, the style, all that stuff. So my book is set in the 80s. So I will be leaning into all of these cultural things that I sort of know really well. So it doesn't have to be about that, but incorporating that, it gives you that passion to keep going and keep writing and keep digging. I think looking back in your history sometimes gives you some clues.
No, I think that's a good answer. That's a good tip because yeah, I find it with a lot of authors when I ask this question, they say variations of the same thing, just like write what's in your heart, write what you want to say, not necessarily what you think the readers want to read, but what you want to say. What's your message? What is it that's authentic?
Yep, 100%. I
Because
and I
that
think
voice
that's
comes from within. It's not drawing it on a board and just going, well, this might work.
I think that's why I like writing, because when you write, it gives you clarity of thought. Like you're like, that's
Mm.
what I want to write, right? I may think something, but then when I go to write it, I'm like, oh, that's not really what I now when you write it, I think you get that clarity of thought, and that's what I really, really like.
Yeah, it's a very cathartic process. It's soul searching and creativity, and it's quite spiritual in a way.
I totally
Well,
agree.
great talking to you, Trent. So what we're going to do is we're going to post this podcast on our podcast page at the International Writers. There's a special page called the Author Shout Out. You saw it. I'm sure you saw
Yes,
it on our website. It'll be there permanently, so you can refer readers to it or any followers. We'll also send a copy of the podcast to you so that you can post it on your website or pass it around to people, whatever you want to do with it. It's up to you.
great. I can't thank you enough. It's always great to interact. This is our second time, and hopefully there's more down the road.
Great, man. Great talking to you. Have a great week, huh?
You too. Thank you. Bye, Rial.
All right, Trent. Bye.